Beautiful people, and hello, Gary. We're here with Gary Humphries. How are you, Gary?
I'm very good, thank you very much, Gordon. How are you?
I'm super duper. All the better for meeting you. Mel, who is on our page, hi, Mel. Mel suggested that Gary and I have a conversation because Gary's been working on, well, he's going to talk about what he's been working on, but he has a channel called Alternative Interactions. That's right, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So what we're just going to have a chat with Gary and find out, pick his brains and find out what he knows that maybe we don't, or what he can confirm that we already know. Yeah. So Gary, give us a little bit of background on you because I don't know really anything about you.
Yeah. I've kind of been aware, wouldn't say awake, but I've been aware all my life.
Okay.
Always known instinctively that something was wrong. Never fitted in to society in any way. Struggled to always make friends, was always the odd one out, always was the one on the outside of the circle of what was going on in life. Had a few very strange experiences as a child. That led to decisions or journeys in my life that were not particularly good,
Okay.
uh,
Mm.
which is a learning experience. So although it sounds negative, it's actually very positive because from negativity or from stress, you grow or you don't.
Yeah.
You thrive or wither. And around 2012, I well, 9/11 was a very big date for me personally, where certain things were very obvious, but I didn't act on it at all. And in 2012, I fully kind of grasped the nettle by the hand, as it were, and changed my life completely. And because 2012 seems to be a big time period for many people, doesn't it? I'm
Sure.
sure you've
Yeah.
come across this.
Mm.
So 2012, I didn't awake, but became so curious that I started researching. I would call myself a researcher more than anything else
Okay.
because, you know, awake or aware, it's not really, it's just research. And as you do the research, the layers of the onion fall away and you begin to see more clearly potentially what could be. And and so from 2013, I was probably researching 6 to 8 hours a day.
Wow.
Yeah, and fundamentally have never stopped. And so I would say generally most days I'm doing 6+ hours of research.
Wow.
Yeah,
Impressive.
yeah,
Impressive.
yeah.
Let me ask you a
I'm
question. Let me ask you a
yeah.
question just before you move on to the next bit. In all of those, because that's many hours of research, what, from what you found, what was the biggest, like, wow, shock, horror, whatever you want to call it, surprise moment that you had in all of your research?
I would say initially the flat Earth.
Mm. Hmm.
I know it sounds crazy, and actually I see it slightly differently these days. Okay, but for me, fundamentally, it was flat Earth. There was a video, and it's probably still up. Most of the old videos that I was watching, oh, what 2015-ish, 16, they've all gone. All the
They've taken
people
them
that were
all
talking,
down. They've wiped them out. Yeah.
they have. So when I'm talking about the research I did, it's very, very difficult because people say, "Well, prove what you've done or show me," but it's not there anymore.
No.
It's been wiped, and it really has been wiped. But there was this video that said Stephen Hawkins is a liar and doesn't know maths, and that triggered me because obviously at that point still I was still, I had not got the balance quite, and that triggered me because obviously Stephen Hawkins was Stephen Hawkins. He knew everything. He was a genius. He was, the story was sold.
Absolutely.
And these guys basically shot a laser beam across the Great Lake to Chicago from one side to the other. And they showed Stephen Hawking's maths, and then they showed the laser beam, which was about, I don't know, 12 inches, sorry, above the water level. And they reflected it back from a boat that was just sitting off the shoreline of, and and it was proven that there was no curvature on the water. It's flat. And And I was like, no, it can't be because it's 8 inches. No, it's an inch squared per mile, isn't it?
A mile. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 8 inches square per mile, something like that from memory. And I was like, no, it can't be because Stephen Hawking's done the math. And if water's flat, how can we create a ball when 74% of the world is water? And oh my God. And yeah, that really did blow my mind. And
Yeah.
I have to say, that probably took me a year and a half to really accept.
To get
I mean,
over.
yeah, 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 yeah. But I was getting all this research and I was doing all the research and it was becoming more and more difficult to disprove this theory,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, so for me that was probably one of the pivotal moments that really there was like an oh my God, we've been lied to, really lied to. How far does it go?
Which is the classic situation we find ourselves in. Hang on, they're lying about this, so what else are they lying about? You know, it opens a massive door, doesn't it, to
Oh God.
many, 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 many things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's quite interesting because one of the people I came across during that flat Earth period, now his channel's no longer there because they took him down several times, in fact, was Martin Ladicki.
Hmm.
And he was doing a lot of flat Earth stuff at the time. Really quite interesting. That's why he calls himself Flat Earth British. You know what I mean? And
Okay.
he still kept that tagline. Uh, and Martin was obviously doing flat Earth stuff, and so he was one of the channels just happened to come up. I was guided to via source to look at it, and then Martin went on to something called Tartaria.
Yeah.
But we didn't really know it was Tartaria at the time. And again, Martin doesn't probably get enough kudos from the entire community because fundamentally everything that everybody talks about Tartaria came from Martin Ladicki,
Okay.
100%. Because I was there at the beginning. We'd gone from the flat Earth bit with Martin, and then we went over to. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat.
Hmm.
We went over to the Tartarian stuff, but at the time, all Martin had was thousands and thousands of photos, and so he would post up 8 hours worth of photos of the ancient times. You know, the Tartarian type,
Yeah.
and it would be like a photo, a photo, a photo, and we would sit there for like 7, 8 hours at a time looking at these photos. My partner at the time trying to figure out what we were looking at because there was no, all there was a photo with no information. And so you're then starting to develop your observational skills of what you're looking at and trying to figure out what you really are. You know, it's quite obvious that a lot of these photographs had no people in them.
Yeah.
So straight away, it's like, where is everybody? Why aren't there any people? And why? And so if there's no people, how did these buildings get there? You know what I mean? Who built the? And eventually, I wouldn't email him. I'm dyslexic. I don't read hard. Nothing I talk about or have learned has come from books directly by me.
Okay.
So I'm a visual learner,
Hmm.
and I'll learn from watching stuff and all sorts of stuff, and download some source knowings, all sorts of things. And so I guess that really was one of those things that really sort of kicked in with me. And so my partner at the time would email like Martin and stuff like that, and you know, there's a guy called Richard Lopez. John Levy then joined in. Um, you know, it was quite a thing, and there's a couple of other people that came in at the time doing their own personal work, and it was amazing. And Tartaria and the Mud Floods were born, and that was a really interesting. I mean, brand new. I mean, who would really have the chance to observe something from a seed
Hmm.
growing to be what has really become not mainstream, obviously, but certainly in our
In our
community.
community, yeah, it's talked about, yeah, openly, isn't it? And about what was the year? What when did that happen?
I would probably say that was about 6 years ago now.
At 60, yeah, because Tartaria is not. I mean, it hasn't been talked about for an awful long time. It's fairly one of the
Yeah,
newer, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But
yeah,
obviously, from that came Antiquitech, which is one of Martin's words, and it's the technologies that they had back at the time.
yeah.
And the fact that we started to discover what cathedrals were used for and churches were really used for.
Yeah.
And recently, I with the beautiful Mel, with the darling Mel, we went to on holiday to Dorset,
Hmm.
and we visited this ancient site. A friend of ours, we stayed with her, and she said, "Oh, I've got this really nice sort of like ancient site, and there's a Norman church that they built in the 1400s on top of this site, and great, we'll have a look." So we went there, and what struck me was this church was made of flint. There's
Hmm.
no flint there, so they had deliberately moved flint to this area and built a church on what is clearly a powerful site because there's like earthworks from 2,500 years BC or whatever. It's a Neolithic kind of site, so they say. So they say.
Hmm.
um so that we were like really thinking, and later in the day we went to a church, a place called Cranbourne,
Hmm.
and this church was again made of flint, but the design of the tower was very, very similar to the other tower that we'd seen. And Mel, she said, I've just been told flint. It's the flint. I don't know why, but it's the flint. I went, okay. So I looked into the flint, and flint is high in silica.
Hmm.
And silica is used for chips, computer chips,
Sure.
and solar panels. And when you look at the church and how they're built, I know from my research that a lot of the old Tartarian bricks, and we're talking about buildings that are between 1,000 and 1,500 years old, plus in the UK. So we're not talking about new kind of things. I mean, I've got images of churches that were built 570 something or founded in five,
Yeah.
found, and the towers are identical. And this is an original church from late late 500s, and it's got the same building. It's got the same kind of materials in it. And the brick back in that day had a very high iron content
Hmm.
because the bricks were batteries.
Okay.
But iron also has a secondary function when we start looking at capacitors and semiconductors and such like, where it controls the flow of the energy.
Hmm.
Now, I live near Norwich in the UK, East Anglia, Norfolk, and we have an old wall that goes round. And this wall has obviously been destroyed, but there's parts of it, and you can still see the original brickwork within it and how it was. And it became very clear that the original flint walls were a semiconductor to adjust the frequency of the area from the ley line that was below to harmonize that area to create the perfect balanced living environment for the people inside.
Cool. Cool. How big is that wall, the perimeter?
Oh, it's gosh, it's quite big. Several square miles. Several
Right.
square.
Okay. So yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we've got the River Wensum going through one part of it, and then we have a big wall, and obviously the wall's been destroyed, and
Yeah.
but the churches, the original churches, are all still there. So the power, or the I like to call it the harmonics
Yeah. Hmm.
because of what they were are still all there. Obviously, the original bells have been destroyed. The technology inside the churches and the cathedral. I mean, a cathedral is called a cathedral because it's a cathode rail.
Cathode. Mm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and so that was just fascinating that sort of came about a month ago, a few weeks ago. Do you know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah. Let me ask you a question about that because obviously I've seen a lot of information about the churches and the spires at the top that have they brought down the energy. Do you think they were used to provide energy for people to and in the homes, or was it more as you were saying these harmonics to create a nice living environment? What do you think?
Both,
For both.
both. Yeah, yeah. Um, the houses, the old houses that we see, the really old houses, certainly in Norfolk, are high iron con brick. So we're talking 30%.
Yeah.
And you can put a multimeter across these bricks and it will run a current.
Okay.
So if you can imagine you're living inside a energy field that's been provided by a cathedral or a church, that's your free wireless electricity.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it also had a very, very important aspect, which has been, I feel, completely overlooked. Now, old buildings, all of them miss one vital component, and that's plumbing and toilets.
Okay. Hmm.
And the reason why all these old houses were built without toilets is because the energy frequency would have made the people breatharians.
Ah, okay. So they didn't need to eat. Okay.
So if you're eating maybe a couple of mushrooms or a few berries off a tree, and that's your consumption for the month or a week,
Yeah.
you're going to have one bowel movement per month.
Yeah.
But, you know, and so you would you do that in a bucket. But
Yeah.
it's very interesting um, that I believe as well that because of the breatharianism and the way that we were a higher frequency being, that our stools had minerals in them that were very key, and we could even poop out gold almost, literally gold.
Wow.
And so that's where we get there's money in muck,
Okay.
I
Hmm.
believe. I think it's an old, but certainly. So in Norfolk, we've got a couple of National Trust buildings, and one of them is called Felbrigg Hall. And Felbrigg Hall, the first toilet and shower type bath was put in the mid 1800s, early 1800s.
Okay.
Pre that, a grand hall in Norfolk had no toilet and nothing like that. And the mid 1800s is where we begin the consumption age of the fall of the Tartarian technologies. And we then become more solid and so have to consume and become the predator prey type ecosphere that we see today.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Let me tell you something. You can add. You're obviously somebody who does a lot of research, Gary. I admire that. Um, so you know that I channel a group of light beings, and you talk about downloads from source. Um, so they've been very, very insistent lately about timelines, about the length of timelines, and they've said more than a dozen times. This timeline that we're on is not as long as you think. Okay, and yes, clearly we've got this tremendous history behind us, but with it, they kept talking about this timeline, and the more that I went into it, and the more research I did about what was happening at the back end of the 1800s, was very clear that that was a significant turning point, the loss of something, and the start of the end is basically the way I see it. When I looked at the back end of the 1800s, the amount of new societies, organizations, structures that were created then, it's just endless, and most of them not good. In fact, I don't know whether I even saw one that was good. They were all bad stuff at the back of the 1800s. The idea that the Hemispheres give me is that this is the timeline that we're on. This one that and we left behind another timeline. I don't know. How does that fit in with your sort of investigations?
Well, as I would say with Richard when we do our show, Rocking Pandoors, I've got flesh of the goose. I've got goosebumps with that one, and it fits 100% with my research.
Okay, okay,
100%. It's very likely that 1774 was when we had a mini kind of reset.
okay.
Um, uh, if anybody follows Jason of Archaics' research on the Phoenix event, we have 138-year divisible periodic events that are cataclysmic sometimes, sometimes local. And 1774, from memory, is a date where I believe we certainly had a major change in something that reduced the population greatly and would fit into a timeline change. That's very interesting that Blicklin Hall in Norfolk and Felbrick Hall in Norfolk and many other properties that I've looked into all say around the 1770s they were remodeled.
Hmm.
And they had to be because they were semi-destroyed.
Okay.
So we're talking mud flood, liquefaction, major die-off of the population for a very long period of time.
Yeah.
And then a population rebirth without the elders of the previous age to guide what had happened previously, and they were at the whim of the dark controllers, whatever word you want to call them. You know what?
Sure.
You
Absolutely.
know. It's an energy. It's an energy form. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
mean, when you look into, I'm sure the emissaries, they say, well, then they weren't good. But it's an energy form that is not beneficial to us. So it doesn't matter what name we give it. It's just an energy that is not a good vibrational frequency.
Mhm.
And I think from the early to mid 1800s onwards, this frequency became the major ruling factor of this realm.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, that makes sense. And the information that I get from the emissaries keep themselves completely away from the carnal, from the what's happening here. They don't go into details. It's not their job. Their job is to promote, be the cheerleaders for the Great Awakening. Yeah. So, and that's super. But obviously they talk from a spiritual element, but often I've got to try and see how that fits into this terrenal element, and it's kind of like, you think a new timeline that we would just appear, we just appeared in a spiritual way. And I think, no, there's a mechanics to this as well.
Yes.
Earthbound mechanics that had to be in place, things like the trains, the orphan trains that just appeared, and the Cabbage Patch children and all, where on earth did they come from? Do you know where they came from?
Yes.
Okay. Tell
Yeah.
us.
Um, Fundamentally, a lot of these children came from below ground.
Okay.
Okay. But in 1891, cloning was perfected, and there is a patent in the patent office for cloning.
Wow. That is
Okay.
clear.
So there's a physical patent for cloning in 1891. We have the Chicago World Fair of 1893, and in one of the halls in Chicago were 3,000 babies.
Hmm.
All those babies were cloned babies
Okay.
because in the world fairs they would demonstrate their um, control, their ability, their power, their latest inventions. And I have actually done a video on this, by the way. On my site there is a video that I explain all this.
And in the video information, you'll have Gary's channel and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So go onto my channel and I think I think it's called Foundlings or something like that, because they call them foundlings, which is always a nice way of they just found them,
Found them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
appeared. Yeah, because I mean, certainly for my research, the official narrative of New York, which was one of the places I looked at, particularly over a 3 year period, I think it's something like just short of 300,000 children were trained into the interior of the United States. So that's 100,000 children a year being put on trains, trained into the interior of the United States. And the official narrative is that these children were given up by prostitutes and ladies of the night who could not look after them. But when you actually look at the um, population figures at that time, it would have meant that something like 90 or 80% of all the women in New York at that time were ladies of the night
Prostitutes.
to give
Yeah,
up that many children.
sure.
So the official narrative doesn't stand for it. But we also have something called baby incubators,
Yeah.
and you could put a baby in for 12 hours, and I think they would grow 1 year in 12 hours from memory. And I have all the photographic evidence of all of this, and I put it up on it's all on that same show.
Okay.
And I think it's up to possibly the early 1920s where you could still take a baby into one of these places and they could be grown on for you.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's mind blowing, isn't it?
Let me ask you a question because my mind's racing ahead when you're talking about this. So, if I understand it rightly, all right, babies were brought in, but there were already a population that existed, yeah? So, when we talk about today, there's this, it isn't talked about so much, but it's still there. The NPCs, the non-player characters. And my mind is asking, those clones, do they just carry on and become the non-player characters, or do they have souls? What about them as beings? What do you think?
I think you hit the nail on the head, and that's exactly what an NPC is now. I think I even say this on my video. My conclusion to this is because there's always a reason behind everything.
Mhm.
Nothing we observe happening in this world has just one reason. There's generally five or six different reasons, and all five or six will go off to different spider web kinds of connections to whatever to create some kind of movement towards something that they want to control or they want to affect a change on. Not always immediately. So some of the history that I've looked into, things that were done 100 years previously, the revenge is taken out on that group 100 years later.
Yeah.
So we work in a time scale of our own life period. These guys work in periods of decades,
Yeah.
hundreds of years, if
Yeah.
not thousands of years.
Sure.
And it's a mindset you have to understand. Okay. Now, I believe that they knew back then that the end times were coming.
Hmm.
You know, I firmly believe that we're in Revelations and we're currently in the second horseman of the apocalypse.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I'm not a religious person. I really am not. But I look at research and research takes me where research takes me. And where that research shows what's going on is what's going on. Now, if you had a major reset where the majority of the population in the late 1770s were wiped out, you would only be left with source connected sentient beings
Yeah.
who are very hard to control. If you introduce a population of individuals that have no major connection to source that could then water down that concentrate. So if you've got a pint glass and in the bottom of it you've got the concentrated orange in the bottom, yeah. How do you water that down to a stage where you can muddy the waters and distill the connection of people's true sentient beings to their higher self, source, the emissaries, whatever you want to call it? Well, you'd have to add water to it. And where do you get the water from? They're called clones.
Okay.
And as the years have gone on and these have bred in and we've intermingled and intermingled, so our connection, the general connection with source has diminished because these NPCs have watered down the true power of what we would have been back then. Because
Okay.
we only see a fraction of what we're capable of now. I mean, I'm sure the emissaries have said to you, "Oh my God, a true human with his connection to source in his own power, sovereign power, is one of the most powerful beings in the universe."
For sure. For sure. Yeah.
So how would you water that down? You'd create NPC clones, you would breed with them. But what you'd also do is you'd create schools and you'd create a religious fervament
Hmm.
where you could then control and brainwash those NPCs or the clones into believing a certain set of circumstances which you could then unleash into the general population.
Hmm.
Does that resonate with you in any way, Gordon?
Absolutely, yeah. And you know what I'm actually thinking, because what you've described is it's the times before the flood, where the angels came down and they started to breed with the people, and they changed the kind of the genetic structure of the people there. Um, so yeah,
History repeats itself, doesn't it?
yeah,
With differences, but it's the same story, it's
same
the same
story.
playbook.
Yeah.
It just rolls and repeats and repeats and repeats.
Sure. And of course, there is in the I think the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new. So quite why we're surprised is a mystery,
Yeah.
really. We shouldn't be surprised. Let me ask you another question then. So, I mean, that's fascinating, all of that. And each one of those rabbit holes we could dive down and
Oh
spend
God, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
next few
yeah.
hours talking about. So, you were saying that you thought that we were on the second horseman of the apocalypse in the
Yes,
Revelation, yeah?
yeah.
Okay. Remind me, because my mind's not clear on that. How many horsemen do we have in total?
I think there's from memory, there's five, isn't there?
Five, yeah. Uh,
And the fifth one is the Phoenix event that Jason talks about because it's got no rider.
okay.
And
Okay.
that's fundamentally death, isn't it? Death comes.
Okay. So the second horseman is what? Where are we?
Well, the first horse, we follow the Olympic um, timeline.
Hmm.
It's very interesting that the Committee of 300 are known as the Olympians.
Hmm.
There's no coincidences.
Not at all, no.
And we know that the Committee of 300 is one of the NGO background groups, just like the Bilderberg Trilateral Commission, Council of Foreign Relations, you know, etc., etc., etc. It's all the same kind of people playing the game for their master to create division and the problems we have currently in this realm.
Yeah.
So the first Horseman of the Apocalypse came in 2020, and that was Apollo Pharmakia.
Okay, so we know what that's the pandemic, yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, 100%. And it's very interesting that in April 2024, we had an eclipse across America,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
and we got a corona from it.
Hmm.
And so the flame of the Olympian via the corona was handed from one age to the next.
Okay.
And the second horseman of the apocalypse is to take peace from the world
Okay.
using tiny swords or daggers. And we have seen an exponential increase in stabbings and knife crime
Hmm.
generally within this realm since that has come in.
Sure. Sure, yeah.
And it's just to take peace from the earth and to cause discord. And this
Yeah.
is exactly what's happening.
Uh, okay. Okay. Yeah. And my mind, if I recall Revelation, because I used to have to study it when I was a kiddie, um, it all ends when Jesus comes on a white horse, finally, and comes and takes away the goodies, and the baddies decide those who want to stay behind, and they're, very happy to stay behind and live in that thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
What's your feeling on that? What do you think that might be? Do you think really Jesus is going to come on a white?
no,
What do you
no,
think it might
no.
be?
The white horse rider is Apollo.
Oh, Apollo. Hmm.
Yeah. So I think the original texts are Greek,
Hmm.
and the Greek was changed into Hebrew, which is a language that does not predate anything. Hebrew is a relatively modern language compared to Greek.
Okay.
So again, there's a lot of, I call it skullduggery and shenanigans, but there's a group of people who control this realm currently in the physical, rewrote certain books, changed certain meanings
Sure, yeah.
by taking it from the Greek language to Hebrew, to then put it back into English or other languages. And because they were the middlemen, they had the opportunity to change everything and the meanings of.
Okay.
And so the 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 analogy is correct. The detail is not, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Sure.
And so what we're talking about in 2040, and it'll probably be May the 16th, 2040, because we can be that precise from Archaic's work. I mean,
Fantastic.
Archaic's can even, I mean, Noah's flood happened in 2239 BC, and it began in the month of May, and it was May the 16th when it began.
I've heard that date. I've heard that date mentioned for a number of things. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And that would be a 138-year period that's divisible by the last big reset we had, which I
Okay.
think is something like 4039 BC.
Hmm.
Yeah, I haven't got the notes; it's just from my head. But
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
we're fundamentally saying there's not any real history pre 4000 BC, because we had a reset and we had a biblical reset and we went into a new age. So in how can I describe this in a way that might make sense? When we have a circle in Christianity, there's a cross through it.
Hmm.
Each cross represents the four quarters
Hmm.
of time, and each quarter is fundamentally nearly a 6,000 or 6,000 year period,
Okay. Hmm.
divisible by 138 years. Okay. Again, if you look at my work, I've got slideshows of all this sort of stuff. But fundamentally, we get 47 138-year periods per quarter.
4,738. Okay.
Yeah. So the reset happened on year one, and then we get 47.
Hmm.
And so 2178 will actually be the end of this cycle.
Okay.
And there will be what we would term as a biblical reset, and we will go back to year one again,
Okay. All right.
which is the Adam and Eve story, all this kind of stuff. And we are right at the end of this period. But before that period can begin, the reset, we have to go through where the worthy or the lambs go back up, and those that have been naughty on the naughty step stay here and uh, go through all the eighth king and all the bits and pieces they talk about.
Okay. All right. So let's tie that up with what I get from my channeling, which is very much, and I'll tell you something. I've just had a chat with a guy called Sal. I think did you say
Yeah,
that?
I
Yeah.
saw that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, just before I came
So
on.
Sal channels, and he channels a light being called Charlie. It's a name that he give it. And he mentioned that we've got a window of 15 years. All right. I don't know whether that's on the video that we've, because I've split it into three, which ties up perfectly with what you're saying. It's like this 15-year window of what's coming, and then that's when he's been taught that's when we get taken off and we're taken to another planet. That's what he's been taught. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
planet dimension, whatever
whatever you want to
language, it's
call
the
it.
same kind of principle.
The emissaries are saying that we're on it. The, their description, all the timelines that we've been on are now it's in one. Everything's compressed, hence things like the Mandela effect and all of that.
Yeah,
People having different memories. We're in one timeline, but we're coming up to the bifurcation where there's going to be a split off, and we're going to go one way, and the people who want to stay or aren't able to go to the right will stay. So really interesting, all of that. It's all kind of, it correlates. Obviously, It's very broad brush, but
Yes, a broad brush. Yeah,
May the
yeah.
16th, 2040 is not broad brush.
No, no, no,
It's
no.
very, very. Have you got the hour, the time?
No, no. But 2046 is another major period.
Right.
Um, so fundamentally, in 2040, a third of the population will go.
Right. The goodies.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I
Go,
hope
go
so.
where? Go where?
I don't know. Just go.
Oh,
They
okay.
they they die, move, disappear, whatever.
Okay.
And in 2046, we actually have a another um, big event coming in. Now, some would call it Nubaru, Planet X, whatever, but it's
Okay.
not particularly, okay? Because we're in the Matrix, so there's no real planets in the Matrix. But what is going to happen is in 2046, there's going to be a major disaster again. And what's foreseen is that we're actually going to get another third of the world's population goes. And then those that are left go through to the end. And time speeds up by a third. We lose a third of the day, third of the night. And this is the eighth king coming back, who was stopped by his rule. So the seventh king was in, well, the eighth king was due to start ruling, and then I think we had Noah's flood that stopped that eighth king.
Eighth King, not good. I'm assuming. Not good. Okay.
Very bad man.
Bad man. Baddie. One of the baddies. Okay.
But
All right.
we won't see that. No, nobody. I would almost say, and this is a very broad generalization again, but anybody who's watching this, working on themselves, doing all the bits and pieces, you don't have to be, you know, an angel or anything, but people that are mindfully working on themselves, questioning things, it's very, very unlikely that any of those will ever see these kind of events. But certain people and certain people who have been doing the shenanigans will, without doubt,
Sure.
feel the full wrath of this.
Yeah, and the book of the Law of One talks about the fact that we just need to be 51% halfway service to others. It's the balance. It's tipping the balance. Talking to Sal, his guides are saying we just need to be halfway. He's got a different figure, like we can only maximize 88%, but as long as we're 44%, 45, but still halfway.
Yeah,
We've got to be halfway of our potential. So it's not an undoable thing, it's very
no,
doable.
yeah, it's very, very. I mean, fundamentally, I think a third of the people will never change and will always be here, and so we have a 66% population that have the opportunity to do something or not. But our connection to source and our higher self, our spirit, our own personal spirituality, if you want to listen to your inner voice and your gut feeling and sort of tune into yourself, the inner work, that's one thing. If you keep externalizing your power and saying, save me somebody, no one's going to come and save you, because this
Sure,
this realm that don't happen. The
sure.
only person to come and save you is you.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
believe firmly from my observation and what's going on.
I agree. I agree. And what are they trying to sell us at the moment? What are they trying to inculcate in our society is to be the victim. Be the victim. Poor you. It's not your fault. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You feel bad, we'll change it. We'll give you a tablet. So that's what they want. They want victims to say, well, who's going to come and save us? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you, and I know how long have we been talking? Right, we're fine. We'll get another 10 minutes or something like that. So a while ago, I mean, I went into the flat Earth thing, and I spent a lot of time looking at it, and it was such a fascinating thing. I came out, first of all, I was absolutely adamant the Earth was flat. That's where I was. After looking at the information, it's flat. It's flat. And then over time, I've kind of come to the place where my mentality is I don't know what the Earth is, but it's not round. Okay. And then, so I talked to the emissaries about it, and the emissaries said, I said, is the Earth flat? And they said, yes, it is. And I said, Is it round? I said, yes, it is. Right. So I remember doing a video on this saying the emissary said that the Earth is flat and round because it's not real. It's all about we project onto it whatever you want it to be.
Yes.
And I had a few comments sort of saying that's an easy way out. That's the easy way out. But based on what the conversation we had before, I think before the we started recording, you were talking about the toroidal a toroidal shape. Yeah. Do you want to
Yeah,
explain
toroidal field
about
of
that?
consciousness. Yeah, yeah. So again, I've done the series which is flat, round, or neither. It's a three-parter, and I go into the round Earth model, the flat Earth model, and then I go into, well, what is it? Is it flat, round, or neither? And actually, it's neither. But it's not a get out. It's actually a very difficult thing to express. Now, a toroidal field is a round field. Okay, it's a circle. You could almost say that the dome that goes above us is a semicircular toroidal field that we observe. Okay, it's round. And the stars are a projection onto that toroidal field to give us the illusion of roundness.
Hmm.
But actually, a toroidal field has a flat plane of inertia inside the center point of the toroidal field. And we live in the flat plane of inertia inside that toroidal field. And it's dead flat, just as a computer game is. So when we program a computer, we live in a matrix. So
Yeah.
when you program a computer, you don't start from a round ball, you know, you start from flatness and then you build it up. But it was always flat and it's always going to be flat. It's just you build up the characters, you build up the holography, you create mountains, lakes, rivers, trees, wildlife, and everything else that goes with it, weather formations, and you program these multiple layers in. And then you can give it the illusion of being round, or you can give it the illusion of not. It's up to
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
But as you said quite rightly, Gordon, we create our own reality tunnels within this collective consciousness. It's a toroidal field of consciousness. Okay. You could almost say it's something like the Akashic records. You
Yeah.
know, they're in this toroidal field. We all have our own toroidal field. Our heart creates a toroidal field, and that toroidal field, when we get close to somebody, the toroidal fields will interconnect and they will exchange information at a subconscious level. And that's exactly what it is. It's almost like a Russian doll. We've got the
Hmm.
doll that fits inside the doll, and these are all multiple toroidal fields creating this realm of where we live. And we live in the center. So if you can imagine an apple, everybody, an apple's an easy one. You cut the apple in the middle and you got the pips. You put the apple on its side, it's flat in the middle with some pips. Well, the pips could be the sun and the moon.
Hmm.
The the kind of bit between the flesh and the pip could be your dome, and the bit at the middle is flat.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
nature shows us what we are, because as above, so below, as within, as without. It's all
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And so I do kind of show this in a mathematical way as well in my videos. And I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody. You know, this is what I believe from my research. So I have gone down the flat earth hole like you did, Gordon, and it blew my mind and it took me years to get through it all. And I was banging the drum on flat earth for a very long time. And then I realized it was a stepping stone
Yeah.
because every single truth that we come to, or every bit of research, we think, ah, that's it. No, it's not. That's just the next piece of stone to stand upon to make the next step to the next thing that's going to come along in your informed field.
Sure. Yeah. I agree. I've got to say, my wife and I woke up. let's have a look. So, 17 years ago. So when would that be? 2009? 2007? No. Yeah, yeah, 2007, whatever. And it was easy. Being awake was easy. There were like 700 videos that you could watch, all of them about the same things. And it was, waking up to the world. It was waking up to the world, and that was lovely. And then bloody hell, it got very complex. And then as time's gone on, it's become more, and I understand. I understand that the awakening world has been infiltrated and with the attempt of confusing us as well, because the more we can be confused, then it's very difficult. It was easy at the beginning. It was like bad, good.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh my God, where does the truth lie? But as you say, there isn't. There isn't a finish line of right now I've got the truth. And I think, what's the expression? Surround yourself with people who are looking for the truth and run like hell from people who say they found it, and
Yeah.
that's where we've got to be. These kind of conversations are fascinating, but they're not the end.
No.
They're not the end. And it's, if anything, they just open more doors to more information. So, that's where, but
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating. Gary, listen, we've chatted for a while. I think, and we could talk for a long while, but I think
Oh
that's
yeah.
probably
Yeah.
enough for the moment.
Yeah.
But I think we should definitely get back together and
I
continue our
agree.
conversations. Yeah.
I agree because obviously with our conversation before we started, I think I have a handle on the creation of the darkness and the darkness coming in, and I'm beginning to show that on my channel
Yeah.
um very clearly. And that's another rabbit hole, but it's only the beginning,
Sure.
and again, throughout all of this, I just class myself as a toddler because the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know.
Absolutely.
And we are toddlers at the moment with our nappies on still, fumbling around in the dark because there is so much out there that we can't even conceive and
Sure.
understand that it really is. We're just kind of giving you the little bits of highlights of, wow, we found this, we think this is probably likely, but nothing is certain.
Sure.
you know
Sure.
and one of my mantras, which is a bit of a strange one, is I am happy to be proven correct as I am to be proven wrong. Now, the reason I'm happy to be proven wrong is because that forces me then to re-look at something with fresh eyes and see where I went wrong
Yeah.
and look at that information. Do you see what I mean? Because there isn't really no right and wrong. It's just feelings, and you've got your emissaries that you download and channel. I have little knowings from my higher self. And videos will appear from nowhere. I'll get shown stuff all the time. I also do a pendulum for confirmation, and it's an amazing thing. It is an amazing thing.
Sure.
So
Sure. Yeah. 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 And I agree with you entirely. I try as much as I can to finish everything that I say with, but what do I know?
yeah,
Because I don't, I don't know. I don't know. I've got some ideas, but it's the knowing through not knowing. It's the like people who've studied their art, and they say the more that I know, the more I know I don't know, and yet they know a lot. Because it's kind of like you know a lot, but you also know that there are flaws in what you believe. That it
yes,
doesn't
yeah,
all tie up. There's something not quite right. And so that's why it's nice to keep your mind open, yeah. Open
yeah,
mind, like a parachute or a
yes, that's
jump
the
work,
one.
yeah.
And eventually we'll hit the
Okay.
ground and we'll go, oh, the ground is hard after all. Who knew?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Just to finish, I remember my aunt, she passed away a while ago, but she was very, very, very pro world, and she thought I was a lunatic, And we had many, many a discussion saying, she would say, you, and I remember once she said to me, and you probably don't even believe in climate change. She was like horrified. And she passed away, and I remember saying to the emissaries, well, I wonder when, now that she's on the other side, I wonder if she's thinking, well, dearie me, or whatever, I don't know. And
Yeah,
they
yeah,
said, do you think she's going to be interested in that? Like,
yeah,
that's the last thing she's going to be interested in is reviewing, who was right, who was wrong. Because, maybe when you get to the other side, you realize all of this has just been a one big joke. You
It's a
know, one,
game. Yeah,
one big game
yeah,
and what are you taking it seriously for?
yeah.
It's just Monopoly.
Yeah, it's the experience, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's like playing a computer game. You're involved in it, you're fully consumed. Everything about that game, the whole world around you disappears.
yeah,
And yet when you come out of that game, you're then back into another form of game, but another form of reality.
something different. And you've got to believe it. You've got to believe it, otherwise it's no fun. If you spend your whole time going, well, this is just a game, just a game, just a game. No, no, no. Or I'm going to meditate for the rest of my life and not be involved. No, that's not why we're here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Gary, fantastic. Thank you very
No,
much
thank you,
for
Gordon.
the fast and boy, hats off to you. You've done your research. You can tell you've got a lot of info there. Yeah. So well done. So I commend everybody to go and join Gary's channel as well because obviously there's some good info there. All
Yeah.
right. So we'll see
Yeah.
you again.
Thank you very much, Gordon.
Bye
Bye,
bye,
everybody.
everyone.